She'd been cleaning out the garage for weeks, but when her hand brushed against that faded pink envelope tucked behind the old toolbox, time seemed to stop. Sarah Mitchell, 54 years old, mother of 2 grown children, stood frozen in the dusty corner of her suburban Chicago garage, staring at handwriting she recognized instantly. It was her daughter Emma's, but Emma had been 8 years old when she wrote this. The postmark read 1998, 23 years ago, and somehow Sarah had never seen it. Her fingers trembled as she carefully opened the envelope, the paper so delicate it threatened to tear. Inside was a single page, lined notebook paper with that distinctive wide spacing they use in elementary schools. The words were written in purple crayon, some letters backwards, others floating above or below the lines. But it was what those words said that made Sarah's knees buckle. She sank down onto an overturned paint bucket, her eyes filling with tears as she read her daughter's 8-year-old plea. "Dear Mom, I know you're sad because Daddy left. I heard you crying last night. I'm going to be extra good, so you don't have to be sad anymore. I love you bigger than the sky. You're Emma." Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, her mind racing back to 1998. The divorce. The financial struggles. The nights she'd locked herself in the bathroom to cry so her children wouldn't hear. She'd been working 2 jobs back then, barely keeping their heads above water, convinced she was failing her kids every single day. And Emma, sweet, quiet Emma, had known, had heard everything, had tried, in her 8-year-old way, to fix it. If you believe a mother's love never fades, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss stories that touch your heart. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. Because what Sarah discovered that day in her garage wasn't just a letter. It was a window into a moment she thought she'd survived alone, and a reminder that sometimes our children see us more clearly than we ever imagine. But here's what made Sarah's hand shake even more as she kept reading. At the bottom of the letter, in that same purple crayon, Emma had drawn a picture. 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One tall, one small. Written underneath in careful letters, "You and me forever." Sarah let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. How had this letter ended up behind the toolbox? Why had she never seen it? The answer came flooding back. The move. They'd moved from their apartment to this house in the fall of 1998, just a few months after the divorce was finalized. Sarah had been so overwhelmed, packing boxes at midnight, accepting help from anyone who offered. Her sister had packed the garage. Her best friend had handled the kids' rooms. In the chaos of that transition, this letter, Emma's precious letter, had somehow gotten lost in the shuffle, ending up in a box that got shoved behind tools and forgotten for over 2 decades. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She needed to call Emma. Right now. But then she hesitated. Emma was 31 now, married, with a demanding career as a pediatric nurse in Boston. They talked every week, pleasant conversations about work and weather and Emma's husband Jake. When had their relationship become so surface level? When had Sarah stopped really seeing her daughter as anything more than a successful adult who'd turned out fine? Little did Sarah realize, Emma had been carrying her own weight all these years. The letter wasn't just a childhood moment. It was the beginning of a pattern that had shaped Emma's entire life. Sarah thought back to Emma's teenage years. How she'd never rebelled, never caused trouble. How she'd gotten a full scholarship to nursing school, insisting her mother not worry about tuition. How she'd always downplayed her own struggles, always reassuring Sarah that everything was fine, Mom, really. That's when everything changed for Sarah. Sitting in that dusty garage, clutching a 23-year-old letter, she suddenly saw the truth she'd been too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed to notice. Emma hadn't just been a good kid who made things easy. Emma had been an 8-year-old child who'd taken on the emotional burden of her mother's pain and never put it down. She'd spent her entire life trying to be extra good so Sarah wouldn't have to be sad anymore. Sarah's tears fell onto the purple crayon words, smudging them slightly. She thought she was protecting her children back then by hiding her struggles. She thought she was being strong by crying alone in bathrooms and forcing smiles at breakfast. But Emma had known, and instead of feeling protected, she'd felt responsible. The phone call she made that evening changed everything. Emma answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and professional, fresh off a shift at the hospital. "Hey, Mom, what's up? Everything okay?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Emma, honey, I found something today. A letter you wrote me when you were 8. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, softly, "The purple crayon one? About being extra good? You remember it?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Mom, I've thought about that letter 1,000 times over the years. I was so proud of it. I wanted to mail it to you, but I couldn't find a stamp, so I was going to put it somewhere you'd find it. But then we moved and I thought you'd thrown it away. I thought you didn't want it." Now it was Sarah's turn to be silent, the weight of that misunderstanding crushing her chest. "Emma, I never saw it. Not until today. And reading it now. Oh, honey, you were 8 years old. You should never have felt like you needed to take care of me." What happened next surprised them both. Emma started to cry, real tears, not the composed, capable nurse version of herself she always presented. "I've spent my whole life trying to make sure you're okay, Mom. Even now. I didn't even tell you when Jake and I were having problems last year because I didn't want you to worry. I'm 31, and I'm still that 8-year-old girl trying to be extra good." They talked for 3 hours that night. Really talked, maybe for the first time in decades. Sarah shared things she'd never told her daughter, about the shame she'd felt during the divorce, the depression she'd battled, the nights she'd questioned every decision she made. Emma shared her own struggles, the anxiety that had plagued her since childhood, the perfectionism that exhausted her, the fear of disappointing anyone, especially her mother. "I thought I was protecting you by being strong," Sarah whispered. "But I was teaching you that you had to carry everything alone too." "We both did the best we could," Emma said, her voice gentle. "You were an amazing mom, even when things were hard, especially when things were hard. I just wish I'd known it was okay to not be extra good all the time." The next weekend, Emma drove home to Chicago. She and Sarah spent Saturday afternoon in that garage, sorting through boxes they'd both been avoiding for years. They found more treasures, school projects, birthday cards, photos from happier times and harder times alike. Each discovery sparked a conversation, a memory, a moment of healing. On Sunday morning, before Emma left to drive back to Boston, she did something that made Sarah's heart swell. She took the purple crayon letter, now carefully preserved in a protective sleeve, and hung it on Sarah's refrigerator. "So you never forget," Emma said, hugging her mother tight. "And so I never forget that being extra good isn't what makes you love me. Just being me is enough." What would you have done in this situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes we all need a reminder that the burdens we carry from childhood don't have to define our futures, and that it's never too late to have the conversations that heal us. Because a parent's love never forgets. But sometimes we need to remember to see our children and let them see us as the whole, imperfect, beautiful humans we really are.